Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminolly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, science fiction. I'm doing another instalment in my library tour and I've got a science fiction and fantasy box down from the attic. So this is a box of books I have read. I think I'm going to do all the books I've read first. And then do the unread ones. So these books are, as I say, all science fiction and fantasy. I ended up bundling them together rather than having separate boxes because it was just easier. So yeah, let's go through them and see what we got. So these first books, these are the reason I chose to get this box down from the attic. So this morning I watched Not Just Book Reviews, excellent video about this series of books, The Belgariad by David Eddings. Which is a series of books I read as a teenager, or not even a teenager. I think I was 12 when I read the first one. And I might even have been 11, and absolutely loved. So like an epic fantasy series from the early 80s about this young guy, Garriad and Garyon, sorry, and his companions going on a quest to find this magical orb and stop a dark god from rising again. But just really entertaining, and it, as Not Just Book Review said in his review, not everything about these books is perfect, but the characters are really wonderful and really memorable. And there's a lovely kind of coming of age storyline that runs through it as well. It really spoke to me as a teenager. So yeah, I really love these books. So we've got the first one, Porn and Prophecy. And I should say that in his video, Not Just Book Review showed the fantastic American mass market paperback edition. So I wanted to show off my UK mass market paperback edition. So Queen of Sorcery, the second book. Magician's Gambit, the third one. Castle of Wizardry, the fourth book. And Enchanter's Endgame, the final book in the series. So yeah, I much love books. When I was a kid, I definitely want to reread them, which is why I rebought them. So yeah, very much looking forward to diving into those again at some point. Next up, right, let's do another series, one that has probably been read by a few more people. It's A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. So I do not have all of these books in paperback. I think I've got all of them in either paperback or on Kindle, or at least all the ones that are out so far. I haven't read, I think I've read all of these ones, but I think there's at least one book in the series I haven't read yet. But I think I'm going to wait for the series to be finished and then reread them from the start. So anyway, in no particular order, I have here A Clash of Kings, A Dance with Dragons, no sorry, I should say A Dance with Dragons, Dreams and Dust, and then A Dance with Dragons After the Feast, and A Storm of Swords 2, Blood and Gold. I can't remember what's in each book compared to the other books, if you see what I mean, but I do really enjoy them. And I think the thing for me that Martin does so brilliantly in his books is juggle so many different storylines. That's the thing that always strikes me about them when I read them, is that you never, when you come back to a character, even if you haven't read anything about them for 100 pages, you remember exactly where you were in their story. And I don't know how he does it, because there's so many different things going on in these books. The fact he manages to juggle it all and make it all work, I think is evidence of his skill as a writer. Right, next up, this is a bit of a weird one. So Life's Lottery by Kim Newman. So a very intriguing book. So this is a choose your own adventure book for adults. So as you can see, it's quite thick. But just as the choose your own adventure books used to when we were kids, you get to points where you have to make a decision. So here, if you sit tight, go to 154. If you cry out, go to 167. So it's a very strange story about this ordinary guy in England and the different paths his life could take. So yeah, a fascinating book. I can't claim to have read all of it, but I've read it more than once, if that makes sense. So I've gone through a few different journeys through the character's life. So yeah, something quite experimental and different, but quite enjoyable. Okay, next up, let's do a few books I got sent as advanced reader copies for review that I've read over the years. So First up, Wild Sun by Ahsan and Shakil Ahmad. So this was really good. So this is kind of a bit like a golden age science fiction story about like a war on this alien planet, and just really gripping and engrossing. Great characters, really fun, lots of action, and you know, that kind of really. It's kind of the kind of book I imagine science fiction books were like when I was a kid, if that makes sense, before I'd read many. So yeah, very entertaining. In a similar vein, Genesis by C.A. Voss. So this again was a really fast-moving, fast-paced, kind of end-of-the-world kind of novel, but quite amusing at times, quite funny at times, and really, really exciting. Next up, Aliens Phalanx by Scott Siegler, which is about the aliens from the Alien movies on a planet that's got kind of a medieval type culture. So the people on this planet have, you know, clearly been living alongside the aliens for a long time, and the aliens are, you know, not hunted, but you know, they're very wary of the aliens, and do all kinds of things to protect themselves against them. And it's got a good twist at the end. It's not brilliant, but it's an entertaining addition to the kind of aliens lore. So yeah, I did enjoy that one. And then another one by a writer I really like, a British writer, Stark Holborn, 10 Low. So this is it's a bit like The Mandalorian. If I was to compare it, you know, if I was to compare it to one thing, that's what I compare it to. So it's kind of a sci-fi western. About this character, Ten Low, who gets kind of lumbered with protecting this child who's like an ambassador or something like that on this desert planet. So lots of action, a bit of humour, really enjoyable. I think Stark Holborn's a great writer. So they've written this series of books I really love called Nunslinger, which are a series of westerns about a nun in the Old West. So like 6 novellas that kind of form together to make this really enjoyable series. And they've also done a couple of books in a series called Trigonometry, so trigger as in trigger of a gun, which are about mathematicians who are gunfighters, who use mathematics to figure out the best angle to shoot at and things like that. So a really interesting, fun writer who writes novels that are like kind of Western adjacent, shall we say, but not traditional westerns. Next up, another one I had as an advanced reader copy, Diamond Eye Phyllis, Volume 1 by Jennifer Caress, which was a really weird series of interconnected short stories about this kind of intergalactic traveller called Diamond Eye Phyllis. I'll be honest, I don't remember a huge amount about what happens in this book, but I do remember it was quite fun. And kind of similar, The Maiden Voyage by The Maiden Voyage and Other Departures by Jessica McHugh. So this is a really good. So it's a series again of short stories that kind of form together to tell a bigger story about a society where humans and human insect hybrids live alongside each other. So some wonderfully inventive stories in here. You see all the different aspects of the society in the stories. There's some that are kind of a bit like horror stories, some that are more traditional sci-fi. There's all sorts of stuff going in here. It's very amusing, very entertaining, really nicely written. I really enjoyed this collection. I definitely recommend it. Okay, moving on to some more kind of traditional sci-fi stuff. To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers. So a standalone novella by the author of the Wayfarers books, which started with A Long Way from a Small Angry Planet. So I really love everything I've read by Becky Chambers. So the Wayfarers books are just really fun, kind of deep space, intergalactic, loads of different alien species all mingling with each other kind of things, but beautifully inclusive as well. This one is about a mission from Earth to another planet, and just feels like it's got some really decent hard science in it, but you know, a really good story as well. So if you've not read Becky Chambers, she's fantastic. This is one I do see on BookTube a fair bit. So Dark Matter by Blake Crouch, which is kind of a multiverse, parallel universe kind of a book. So yeah, just a really, really gripping thriller. I really enjoyed this. It's got tons of twists in it. I'm amazed it hasn't been made into a movie yet or a Netflix series. I don't believe it has anyway, but it feels ripe for that sort of adaptation. So yeah, very enjoyable. On to some classics, or a classic anyway. I know I've got a little pile of classics here actually, so let's do these. So The Demolished Man by Alfred Bester. So a fantastically weird, really brilliant and very imaginative sci-fi novel, which I think I'm right in saying is this one that's got illustrations in. I know one of his other books has got loads of illustrations in, but obviously it's not this one. But yeah, if you've not read Bester, he's a bit like Philip K. Dick in that he's quite weird at times. But yeah, definitely recommended. Another classic, so Second Foundation by Isaac Asimov. So obviously from the Foundation series, probably don't need to say much about it. You know, if you're watching this, you probably know about the Foundation series, but you know, fantastic hard sci-fi. Next up, Neuromancer by William Gibson. So the novel that created cyberpunk. So yeah, just a fantastic book. One of my favourite opening lines of any book ever. The sky above the port was the colour of television tuned to a dead channel. So yeah, a brilliant book, which you should definitely read if you have not. Another brilliant book, which you should read if you haven't, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. Obviously famously filmed as Blade Runner, which is a film I don't love as much as most people do, but I do think the book is excellent. So yeah, very weird, much weirder than the film, and definitely worth reading, as most of Philip K. Dick's books are. This one I've talked about on my Astounding Science Fiction tag, or did I? No, I didn't. I talked about it on my Q&A, I think. Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes. So a wonderful science fiction novel, deeply moving, plays with language brilliantly, about a guy who has like learning difficulties, who's recruited to be part of an experiment to make him super intelligent. And just about how that goes, what happens to him. It's a wonderful book. And then another favourite of mine, I Am Legend by Richard Matheson. I've got another copy of this in another box, so I'll get that down at some point and show you that one as well. But yeah, a fantastic kind of mix of sci-fi and horror about the last man on Earth struggling against these weird creatures which are kind of like vampires. Very gripping, and you know, considered by many to have been the inspiration for Night of the Living Dead. So it's definitely got that kind of vibe to it. Next up, definitely not a classic, but a book I really like, Urban Prey by Peter Beer. First of the Trauma 2020 series. So I read these again as a teenager. Got them out of my local library. I reread this one at the start of 2020 for shits and giggles. It's a kind of dark, kind of humorous at times, so written in 1984. So a British science fiction novel about a dark future, 2020, where I think there's like a world war going on, but not a nuclear war or anything like that, just a kind of trench warfare, about this guy called Becky, or BK, who's a kind of a bit of a kind of petty criminal, about him trying to evade the law and various scams and things like that he's involved in, but a lot of fun. Next up, this is an excellent book, The Power by Naomi Alderman, which is about a future where women have the power to kill men with a single touch. It's an excellent book. So a really fascinating kind of alternative future. Well, maybe it's not an alternative future, who knows? But yeah, I thought this was a really brilliant feminist science fiction. I've got a couple of other books by Alderman which I haven't read yet, but definitely will. But yeah, I thought this was brilliant. This one probably a bit better known. So Battle Royale by Koushun Takami. So you know, you probably know the story from the movie or the manga. But yeah, excellent Japanese hyper-violent or ultra-violent dystopian novel about school kids who are chucked on an island and have to kill each other. So it's kind of like the Hunger Games or Fortnite, I guess, but a lot bloodier and a lot more political. So yeah, thoroughly enjoyed this. Next up, a kind of, I guess, comedy sci-fi, Zoe Punches the Future in the Dick by David Wong. So better known or best known for John Dies at the End. It's kind of weird horror novel and its sequels. So this is the second of a series of science fiction novels he's writing. The first one is called Futuristic Violence and Fancy Suits. So about quite a recognisable near future where everything's recorded all the time, about this young woman Zoe who is inherited a load of money and a criminal empire to go with it, who's fighting against kind of superheroes and stuff like that. So really crazy kind of out there stuff, but very amusing and entertaining. This one, I don't remember much about this, but I've definitely read it. I read it when I was a kid. Sleeping Planet by William R. Burkitt Jr. So some classic sci-fi here. This feels like the sort of book Michael K. Vaughan would pluck out of one of his boxes. Let me read the back because I really don't remember much about it at all. Lulled into a coma by the exotic fumes from a strange plant, the people of Earth experienced terrible dreams while orange-skinned invaders quietly began taking control. But even as the planet slumbered to its downfall, a few Terrans miraculously remained awake. These were the unaffected, men like Brad Donovan and Jimmy Rearson, who battled the invaders with every weapon of technology and psychology at their disposal to prevent Earth from becoming a land of the living dead. So that sounds like a lot of fun. As I say, I've definitely read it, but it was like when I was a kid, so I will reread that at some point. Another book I read when I was a kid, which I may or may not reread at some point, because I think it's probably pretty awful, is Battlefield Earth by L. Ron Hubbard. So famous L. Ron Hubbard, obviously, for starting the Scientology movement, so a kind of a bit of a hack sci-fi writer from the 50s and 60s who recreated himself as the Messiah. I read this when I was in my mid-teens, which is quite good going actually, given it's a 1,000-page book. And I remember it being very silly and quite entertaining. So I probably will reread it at some point. I bought it in order to reread it. But yeah, it's that cover's just so cheesy. It's brilliant. More books should have covers like that. I mean, the guy, I think probably quite deliberately, you can see on the cover there, does look like Jesus, doesn't he? Yeah. So yeah, I may reread this at some point. It does say on the cover that there are over 1.5 million copies in print. How many of those copies got sold? It doesn't say. It's one of those random publisher claims, which yeah, I think possibly a bit dubious. Are we done? No. Right, one more pile here. Right. Ooh, let's see if I can bring these over without causing an avalanche. So we've got The Colour of Magic by Terry Pratchett, which again I read when I was, I think, about 12 or 13. So the first of the Discworld novels. So kind of famous comic fantasy. Pratchett obviously very sadly died not that long ago, but left a wonderful legacy in the Discworld books, which I know many people love. Next up, Star Wars Death Troopers, which is kind of a Star Wars horror novel about this spaceship that's got like undead stormtroopers on it, from what I remember. So quite silly, but very entertaining. The Shining Girls by Lauren Bukes. So a kind of a mix of sci-fi and horror, really, about a serial killer and a woman who can hop through time. I can't remember if she hops through time, or maybe it's him that hops through time. I can't remember. I know there's a time travel element, and I know there's a serial killer element, and I thought it was pretty good, but I think it drops the ball in a few ways, which stopped it being as good as it could be, but still an entertaining and quite different read. This one's something I've read much more recently. So Conan the Cimmerian, the first of the Del Rey collected Robert E. Howard Conan stories. So a fantastic book, great stories, fantastic illustrations in here. If you've not read Conan, you really should. And I hadn't read Conan until I read this, so I'm definitely going to be reading more Conan in the near future. And then finally, Angel Maker by Nick Harkaway, which is a fascinating and very weird British science fiction novel. I can't really remember what it's about. I know it's got bees in it. I think it's one of those books that's got a bit of everything in it. Harkaway is John le Carré's son, and this is he's written a few books. I've got another one by him, which I think is called Tiger Man, which I haven't read yet. But this I remember being really interesting and really weird. And as I say, I can't really remember what it's about. But I think it mixes a load of different things quite successfully. So yeah, so a trawl through my sci-fi and fantasy books. As always, let me know if you've read any of these. And also, as always, I hope you're safe and well, and I'll speak to you again soon. Cheerio.